Hello, everybody, and welcome to Economics Monday on the IBM TV network. I'm Nick Palavita, and with our co-host, we have Kim Calhoun has joined us. Thank you, Kim.
Good morning.
From Raleigh, Durham. Now we have people outside the Raleigh-Durham area this morning. We're going to bring in from Utah the Honorable Dan Worthington. Dan, welcome back to the show.
Yeah. Hi.
And then we're going to move up to Canada. We're going to bring in from our Canadian friend from the north who used to live in Arasha. Let's bring in the modern investing expert, Sasha Starr. Sasha, do Sadanya.
Good morning.
And then Shaquille's still backstage. He's busy, so I'm not going to bring him in until he gets ready. But anyway, we have some exciting topics to talk about today, and we will be joined later on the program by the Honorable David M. Walker. He's sent a confirm he's done with his vacation. He's going to be here at about 30 minutes. He actually took a vacation to the Bahamas, and then he went to St. Thomas and went to San Martin during Thanksgiving, where some of us stayed home. Yeah, I know it was pretty good. Also, wait, we got this guy. He didn't join us on that lawyer discussion, but it was 11:30. Excuse me, it was 2 o'clock in the evening in Italy. Let's bring in our favorite Italian, Roberto Sparano. Buongiorno, as they would say.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Gosh, it's amazing when you're in Italy, they speak English really well over there. And I can't speak their language to save my life. I usually go buongiorno, and that's about it. Or
I can certainly listen to it. I love listening to it.
So. Yeah, grazie, as soon as you get fed. And they have good food over there. So that's the important thing. Anyway, listen, today for our topics, we'll be joined by the former Comptroller General of the United States, the Honorable David M. Walker. He's going to be here in about 30 minutes. But there are some exciting topics to talk about in the world of economics. The first one, of course, deals with the Omicron variant, which took the stock market down 900 points. And I don't know if you checked it today. I haven't had time. Sasha, I don't know what the market is doing today.
It recovered somewhat, but I think it's a short recovery. I think that the worries are still there, and I think that this week is going to be down week.
Really, I put a poll on LinkedIn because they like polls now, whether they thought this was going to hurt the economy, and almost 70% said no. They believe the Omicron variant will not be a major issue coming forward. Of course, just because 70% say no doesn't mean it's no. It just means 70% on LinkedIn said no. Because I also did a poll about whether polls are worthless on LinkedIn, and 70% said yes, they're worthless. So I took a worthless poll on LinkedIn. So I continue to take worthless polls, but they didn't think it was going to take effect. Now, there is something that may affect the entire economy, and that deals with the new $2 trillion social infrastructure bill. Now, we only have one person here from the United States right now. Well, let's bring in, we are way outnumbered here. I need some more people
there's two of you.
There we go.
There's 2 of you. There's 3 of you.
Now there's 3 of us. Now, at least the U.S., we're equally represented. We have one from Canada, one from Australia, one from Italy. But we're about...
Buongiorno, Roberto. Come sta?
Yeah. So, yes, grazie. We have this...
That made no sense, Nick, but okay.
It doesn't, but I
don't ravioli.
Have any sense. Ravioli. There we go. Yeah, lasagna. Steve has joined us from the World Edition, and Kim has joined us. Now the Americans outnumber the people from around the world. It's about time. We are the world's
Kim, it's so good to see you.
See, he's going to go namaste. So Steve, here it is. We have your friend, President Biden, has put $2 trillion on the table for a quote social infrastructure bill. By the way, I did a poll on the social infrastructure bill. Nearly 70% of Americans on LinkedIn are against it. Seriously, I just asked, are you for it or against it? Real simple. And they were against it. They thought it was a waste of money. So nearly $2 trillion. Steve, what's your thoughts on your friend, your buddy, your wonderful person, your party member, spending $2 trillion?
You proudly show us photos of you with him.
Yeah, right. There you go. You take
first
photos
of all,
with his kids.
I just want to tell you, it's so great to see Kimberly Calhoun. I have not seen her in months, so it's such an honor to be here with her.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I've been a stranger, but I've been thinking of you and your family this whole holidays. First of all, I just want to say that I think that on this, I would have to agree with Senator Manchin in that I think we want to not overdo the amount of infrastructure money that we're putting in to the country right now. I think that uh, I've always said that we've got to score first downs, we've got to score touchdowns, and I think getting this infrastructure deal, which has been put in place, voted into law, is the first good step we can make as a nation before investing another in a social infrastructure bill. There are a couple of things about the new infrastructure bill, the 1.75 trillion I like. It does expand healthcare to the 12 states that have not expanded under Medicaid. It does give some leeway for negotiating under Medicare for prescription drug prices, and there are some benefits that are there for the American people. But for these progressives that are saying, for a while, a couple of weeks ago they were saying, "Well, hold off on the infrastructure bill until we can get agreement on that." To me, my analogy would be that'd be like playing a football game, saying, "Look, we're on the 30-yard line, we can kick a field goal, we can score a touchdown. Let's just keep waiting until that perfect play." Which I think would just squander the whole thing. So, Nick, that's my answer to you. I think Senator Manchin has, in this situation, I don't think there's anything wrong with listening and working with your Republican colleagues to try to get legislation that makes sense for the American people. But I think it's too much too fast.
Okay,
even on the vote save that passed, it went straight down party lines.
Let's hear from the Americans first. Kim, what are your thoughts about this $2 trillion bill?
I just don't think that they ever created a budget to be able to really use it. I think it's going to river up, not trickle down or even river down. I think that we'll find at the end of the day, just like the money that they made up last year, that it will all end up in someone's pocket, maybe top 5 people, but it's not going to come to the people it needs to come to. It's not going to generate revenue and revenue stream in the economy like it's intended to. It's not going to stimulate. It's going to go in one direction. We saw this happen a year ago, and I don't believe in it. I don't believe in our system anymore.
Okay.
Sorry to be such a pessimist.
Professor Worthington, what are your thoughts about this new $2 trillion social infrastructure bill? You need to unmute, Professor Worthington.
I got it. Well,
There you
how
go.
do I unmute?
Now we can hear you. We're good. We can hear you.
Okay. So, no, I agree with what's been said about it's way too much money into the system. They should let the physical infrastructure bill see what impact it has on the economy. There's been way too much money pumped into the economy. The debt is out of control. They have too many unfunded tax liabilities. Expansion of some of the Medicare programs is stupid right now, especially since Medicare is running out of money. It just makes absolutely no sense that we'd be doing this time, unless Kim is right, and it's the pre-retirement full funding of Democrats leaving the House a retirement plan, and they're funding their buddies so they can get the kickbacks. It doesn't make any sense from the American standpoint. Some of the funding of the medical care issues in the states makes some sense, but because there are people who are doing without medical care, and they shouldn't be. But there needs to be a balanced dialogue about this. And like Shaquille said, everything's been done along party lines, not been bipartisan. The only one that's made any sense in the Senate or had a cool head is Manchin. And he's the only one that's keeping these people from taking their rail cars and running them off the tracks and really, truly destroying our economy. Our economy is on the brink already. What they're planning to do now would send a colossal wrong message. And especially with all this new propaganda about the Omicron. I'll stop right now and let everybody else comment.
Okay, Shaquille, you're up. What do you think of Europe? No, Europe's not up. You're up. Shaquille, what are your thoughts about this new bill?
The new one or the one that's just passed?
The one that was passed just by the House, 1.8 trillion, almost $2 trillion.
For the most part, sorry, Dan. For the most part, I don't have an issue with a lot of the things that are being talked about. Universal pre-K, for example, that makes sense. That's something that most other countries, wealthy Western countries have. So it makes sense to provide that to American kids and to American families. But it's what's being taught at those pre-Ks. That's the issue. And when you federalize that, perhaps a 3-year-old in Utah have parents that would like them to know a little bit more about the history of Utah rather than the history of, California or, the 1619 project. So, I think that that's an issue, but actually providing funding for that seems reasonable. Healthcare has been an issue for the United States for a long time, and that's something that needs to be dealt with. Overall, the cost of it, okay, we're talking $2 trillion. We're talking about that being staggered over 10 years. So, if you average that, it's not quite how it'll work, but if you average that at $200 billion a year, it's not a massive expense. The United States can absorb it. There is inflation in the United States anyway because of other issues. I don't think that this is going to dramatically add to the inflation, but I do think it's a waste of money. I don't think that the American people should be paying for that right now. And if they do want to pay for it, then as I keep saying, when it comes to tax rates, what you need to do is you need to broaden your tax base. You cannot just keep hitting the rich because it doesn't work anyway. They say they're hitting the rich, but they know if the rich don't have income in the first place, you can give them a 500% tax rate. It's not going to matter because they don't have income in the first place. They want to have a tax on international profits. Well, a lot of companies just reinvest their profits back into R&D. And if you try to tell them that they must pay tax on their minimum turnover, they're going to say, we're going to lay off people in the R&D department and we're going to blame it on you, the government, because you've introduced this tax. So, if you want to actually have a sensible conversation about taxes to fund whatever it is you want to fund, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise, whatever it is that you want to fund, you have to target tax as a percentage of the GDP first. Agree on what you think that the percentage of GDP that government spending should be, and then work out what's the best way to raise that. Should wealthy people like myself contribute more than, somebody who doesn't have the same sorts of wealth or the same sorts of earning power as I do? Yeah, of course I should contribute more. I'm not an American, but if I was, right, of course we should contribute more. But we shouldn't be paying all of it. And when Biden and other people say we just want the rich to pay their fair share, that sounds reasonable. Yeah, like we should pay our fair share. But when the fair share that's being asked for is all of it, that doesn't seem fair, right? That's
I don't think it's all of it. It's only 90%.
The bottom 50%. The bottom 50% of the United States pays nothing in taxes,
in federal income tax,
which is ridiculous. And so when you say to somebody, it's like if you're a child. I'm an only child, so I don't really know, but I would imagine that if I had siblings, right, and you all get given chores to do, and then you say to one of the siblings, look, we just want you to do your fair share of the chores. That's all we're asking for. And the sibling says, okay, well, what's my fair share? We want you to do 90% of the chores, right? And my other sibling can do 10%, and I'll sit here and do nothing. And they go, that sounds ridiculous. Why should I put up with that? And you go, well, that's what the US tax law looks like, so why shouldn't I have the same privileges?
Well, let's hear from Italy. So, Roberto Sparano, what are your thoughts about us spending more than your entire country's worth, just our government alone, in 1 year? We have to unmute you, make sure you can get on here. There you go. You muted yourself, Roberto.
Yeah.
There we go.
We in Italy we are very used to debt, so we're living on debt since the Marshall Plan in 1996. So I'm not so scared about the debt that you are. But I mean, seeing it from a European point of view, you have a huge problem with some of the basic needs and rights we have in Europe. But like Medicare and all those things, I mean, which during the pandemic have been, I mean, your system, I'm not going to say in an American network that your system was proven wrong, but wasn't so perfect as you think your system is. And maybe I mean, to be absolutely honest, you have a huge social problem in the US. You have a racial racism is more is a social problem as well. And I mean, some money sooner or later you have to put some effort into it and some money into it. I don't know if 3 billion is a lot of money or is not enough money, but I mean, if you can't go ahead by thinking that the market, the economy will solve everything, and you can't go ahead thinking that the federal state should have a net zero balance in a modern world. It doesn't exist anymore. And I mean, one of the things I think we learned from the pandemic is that the way of the states to approach uh, spending has to be changed. We went through 10 years of austerity in the last 10 years, and I don't see any benefit from all this austerity. Germany is now spending in infrastructure because they've been virtuous in German terms for 10 years, not spending anything for infrastructure, and now they have to re-spend a lot of money in infrastructure because they have to recreate everything because everything is outdated. So
Right.
But Roberto,
let's
the Germans' version of outdated infrastructure is not like what's going on in the United States. I mean, Germany is absolutely gorgeous compared to what's happening in the US.
why is it criticizing the US?
If Italy would like to, and if Italy would like to have a better financial future, they should do what Greece should do and follow the UK and exit the European Union because it's such a disaster. It is
European Union.
Allow me.
Please, yes.
We will have fun for the next 3 to 5 years, for the next 2 to 3 years. And how good was the decision of Brexit? And they're already so happy about Brexit that they don't have gasoline. They don't have products on their shelves. And they have, I mean, the Brits have to eat frozen turkey this year.
Roberto, nonsense.
Allow me.
He lives in Europe.
I mean, if I know good enough the Brits, they will file to enter into the European Union in at least 5 years, because being a pain somewhere, like they've been for Europe for 30 years.
Hey, Roberto, I don't have
to say Italy is going to have fun for the next 5 years. Has it been fun for Italy so far? I don't think so.
Yes.
What's your debt looking like?
Nick, I just wanted to make one last point real quickly on infrastructure.
Sasha's up next.
So, Sasha, start. Go ahead, Sasha.
Yeah, Sasha.
The
$2 trillion bill.
Okay.
You're a neighbor.
You may not like what I'm going to tell you, but it's truth, and you have to know about that. With unfunded liabilities in Medicare and social system, America is broken. Its debt approaching $200 trillion. What does this 1.8 means on a bigger picture? It means nothing. In fact, what I would say is, when person is committed to execution, let's say electric chair will do, and on the last day, he's offered a nice dinner with a steak and all these wonderful things, so he can enjoy his last day. So U.S. in such situation, it is almost begging to get its people, and this 1.8, by the way, you don't even mention that this is money of U.S. people. The only thing is they're taking them now instead of sometimes in the future, maybe 50 or 100 years from now, when most of the people won't be even around. Right. So they're taking them now. It's U.S. people's money. So they can enjoy them today, even with all the slippage and all the corruption or so on. So out of, let's see, half of the money, it's corruption and it's kickbacks and all that stuff, but half will still trickle down to some people. There will be some jobs here and there. So I would say go for it, and not for 1.8. Go for $10 trillion or even 20 if you can, and just enjoy yourself.
Hey,
That's what I would say.
Make future children of those legal immigrants. That
a note to our viewers.
While Americans leave.
He's from Canada, so he doesn't care if our economy is destroyed, but for the Americans, we have...
Nick, you have no economy. You have $200 trillion worth of debts. What kind of economy you're talking about? Come on.
Future debts. They're way out.
The 1 point...
That's the way of thinking.
We're talking about present.
1.8 trillion is like the credit card surcharge. You don't get free points.
One last point I'll make on the infrastructure, Nick, if I could. I think we often forget. For me, the concern shouldn't be about the ambition of a plan. I mean, the United States of America, in the peak of the New Deal, was spending about 3% of our GDP on infrastructure, and plus science and innovation. Okay, but it's the execution of those plans. So we often forget when Roosevelt was president, he modernized 1,000 airports. He put electricity in every rural city in America. Okay. When Eisenhower was president, he created the interstate system within 4 years. And the George Washington Bridge was built in 4 years under budget. Okay. Today in New York City, a mile of subway can take hundreds of millions of dollars to spend and 10 years to build. Where we live in North Carolina, as a city councilor, we still talking about commuter rail 7 years after the transit bill that we passed in Wake County. And I see feasibility study after feasibility study, but nothing is happening. So here's my point. Where this would fail is if 5 years from now we wake up and there's no tangible projects that the American people can see. Will there be high-speed rail between?
No. Oh, he's left us.
But he's right. He's
let me
respond
to Steve's question. Let me respond to Steve's question. No, there will not be high-speed rail because government is the problem. That's why things take so long. And when you say, will the American people see anything? 550 billion of the 1.8 trillion that was passed is for climate change. You think the American people or anybody in this world is going to see anything tangible from that?
But the point is, the cost of infrastructure shouldn't be rising because other European countries, including Italy, Spain, other countries are building infrastructure much faster than the U.S. Right?
No,
you're right.
Wait a moment. Infrastructure in Italy faster than in the U.S.
Maybe not.
Let me tell you that we are still building the same highway from Rome to the south in 30 years, and it's not yet finished.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe
let's keep it in perspective.
I'll end with that. But the point is, when Roosevelt was president, because I read a lot of history. Yeah, when he was president, his right-hand guy was Harold Ickes, who ran the World Works Process Administration. 3 million people were employed for that agency. Okay, but they were able to get things done because, if we wake up 9 years from now and there's no train, there's no bridge. Now, I like the investment in broadband, right? The point I'm trying to make is the devil is in the detail. And so,
but I fully agree. You made the point actually of everything.
Okay, sorry, I'll shut up now. Coffee was too
no. You actually, that's right. I mean, you made the point. Everything is fine. Social 3 trillion, 4 trillion, and quoting Sasha, make it 100 trillion. But every cent has to go has to be on the table, has to be invested. Results, you have to have results. Otherwise,
this is the big problem. But this is the big problem with government, and it's just more obvious in the United States. But it's a problem with government everywhere. That's my criticism of the EU. In every other industry, things are results oriented. You've got to deliver a result. You've got key performance indicators, KPIs, all of that sort of stuff. Except when it comes to government. If you're in government, if you fail, you get more money. If I failed when I worked for a bank, I'd get fired. Right? I wouldn't get a bonus. But if you fail in government, it's, we didn't put enough money into the program. It's never the program doesn't work.
Shakil, one of the principles of democracy is that if you fail in government, you lose the elections. That's being terminated.
Roberto, the United States.
Roberto, you're going to have to give him a off
Roberto,
the air.
let me say a couple things. First of all, the United States is not a democracy; it's a constitutional republic. Okay, that has some democratic processes. It's a pretty important distinction because the Constitution is supposed to allow people to limit government action. That's pretty important. Secondly, what democracy does Italy have when the European Union? This is why we had Brexit. What democracy? What self-governing sovereignty does Italy or any other EU member state have when a European Union Parliament and European Union Commission representatives can pass laws that nobody in the EU can have any say in, where the parliamentary process is completely opaque, and where we have
that's absolutely not true. And that's absolutely not true. That's not factually not true.
It is true.
Because the laws have to be signed by the parliament and by the council, and the council is the government of the country.
Absolutely not. Firstly, European Commission commissioners are appointed for life. There is no clear process.
For what? For life. They're not for life.
There's no clear provision for how they are elected or how they pass their laws. And secondly, why would you want
factually not true?
Why would you want somebody in Belgium telling Italy what Italy should do within its own?
Why our Australian and European Union are fighting each other?
I'm British.
We'd like to bring or whatever.
Country, I'll just have you know.
Okay. Why the Brits or Italians are going each other again, and our friend from Canada, we'd like to bring in the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, to discuss this infrastructure bill. With us, we have Roberto Sparano, an attorney in Italy, Sasha Starr, modern investing in Canada, Shaquille Latmer in Australia, and of course Kim Calhoun, Steve Rao, and Dan Worthington, all in the United States. David, we're discussing this new infrastructure bill that was passed by your House of Representatives in the United States, and it's $2 trillion. We did a poll on LinkedIn, and we promised to tell our people in LinkedIn who are viewing this the results of the poll. 67% of the people are against this new nearly $2 trillion infrastructure bill. What are your thoughts about this? Since you live near Washington, I'll never put you in Washington, D.C. right now, but you're next to Washington, and they're about to spill over to another $2 trillion. It's not the $1 trillion. We already passed that. That's going to build roads and bridges. This was coined a social infrastructure bill, and it's being sent down the throats of the American public. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's good to be back with you. First, I was a little perplexed when I was listening before because, it sounded like the Republicans and Democrats arguing. And when somebody said results in government, that's an oxymoron. The government, it's inputs, outputs, not outcomes. And you're right that in a democracy, but we have a constitutional republic. In a democracy, the ultimate accountability is to get reelected. The problem with that is that with gerrymandering, with the power of incumbency, with the lack of term limits, that is an inadequate accountability mechanism. But let me get to your question. First, I was for the first infrastructure bill that passed with a bipartisan vote because it was for primarily traditional infrastructure. Roads, bridges, airports.
Less than 10% of it went to that.
Broadband, I'm keeping going. Broadband, except roads and bridges about 10%. The other things I'm talking about was much more than 10%. The big heartburn that I had about the first infrastructure bill was it had $9 billion to build charging stations for electric cars, which I felt was not a public responsibility. I don't recall us spending billions of dollars to build gas stations around the country. And so, why do you want to subsidize the automotive industry that way? But that's a different issue. On the new bill, they may call it an infrastructure bill. It's not an infrastructure bill. It's expanding the welfare state. It is increasing mandatory spending at a time where we already have too much mandatory spending. When I say mandatory, I mean direct and indirect. Spending out the front door and tax credits. Those are both mandatory spending. My view is that we should not be increasing mandatory spending, until we end up doing something with regard to the largest unfunded social insurance programs that we have, which are Social Security and Medicare. We have over $102 trillion in unfunded obligations. 65.5 trillion relates to Social Security and Medicare. The idea that you don't need to worry about that, and if we create new mandatory spending or new government programs, whether they be through direct spending or tax credits, all we got to do is pay for the new ones, which, by the way, they don't pay for these. But even if you did pay for them, that's totally inadequate, because we've already made over $100 trillion in promises we don't know how we're going to pay for. So I think there's a fundamental difference between the first bill and the second bill. The second bill is also direct party line vote. And I just hope and pray that Joe Manchin, Christian Sinema, and maybe a couple of others might end up holding the line and just say no.
Okay. And this bill is going to be going to the Senate. Okay. So the thing is, it's just was passed by the House, and it seemed to me it got a pretty big push by the House. In other words, a lot of votes in the House. It wasn't close. Now it's going to the Senate.
Oh, no, it was close. No, it was close.
I thought it was like 200 something to 100 something.
No, it went across partisan lines, and there was a handful of Republicans that shouldn't be Republicans.
Yeah, it was a handful. It was a close vote.
Really? Just remind me, because this is one thing I actually don't know off the top of my head. So obviously in the House of Representatives, you actually lose one vote because you have to elect a speaker if you're the party in power. With a 50-50 Senate, is there a speaker of the Senate that doesn't get to vote?
No, the vice president. If it's a tie vote,
yes, vice president. Okay.
The vice president has the tie-breaking vote, but only if it's a tie vote. So that's the only circumstance in which the VP votes. And
live on air, Shaquille didn't know something about American politics.
Amazing. But
there was only one thing you didn't know, Shaquille.
That's one.
But when we're sitting with, has anyone bothered to poll the American public? Because you can do this instantaneously now. And
they've polled the Americans say we don't want it, we don't want it, we don't want it. So the politicians go, excellent, they don't want it. Let's do it. That's our policy.
No. Here's the problem. I've seen polls that say the opposite. I've seen polls. It depends on how you word the poll, right? I've seen polls that give, I don't know, about 56 to 60% in favor. The problem is, the way that people poll, it's fundamentally flawed. Okay. Would you like additional child care tax credits? Would you like additional housing benefits? Would you like additional this? But they don't talk about, well, who's going to pay for it? What are the consequences going to be with regard to inflation? They don't provide contextual sophistication. And so therefore, unless you have a full and fair view of what's going on and a knowledgeable a set of people who are actually voting, they're really not that meaningful.
Okay. Steve likes to talk about FDR's great expansion of infrastructure and those sorts of things, which, hey, was absolutely fantastic. But FDR also introduced a whole heap of, coming out of the Great Depression, a whole heap of, cradle to grave social programs that there was no request for. The American people weren't asking for it. And you've gone from, government spending being just a few percentage points of the GDP of America to all of a sudden being where it is today. And you've seen this massive increase. And Milton Friedman talked about this in the 70s, about the people paying into Medicare at that time. They might be getting a benefit today, but people 30 years, 40 years down the road are going to get a very raw deal indeed. And that is exactly what has happened with that program. It is an unfair program. It punishes future generations, and it doesn't work. And the only time that we ever see in almost any country on earth bipartisan support for anything, it's when it comes to the citizenry having less rights or the government spending more money, right? It's never about other things. The way for Biden to get his infrastructure bill passed is to increase it so it's not just two $2 trillion bills. It should be $4 $2 trillion bills. $4 trillion for Democrats' plans, $4 trillion for Republican plans. I guarantee you the Republicans will soon vote for it.
See, that's part of the problem. The way things have been, the Democrats, you give me my new social program, which is direct spending. The Republicans, you give me my tax credits. We'll compromise. the bottom line hemorrhages. But
And
understand
that's when they agree.
there's a fundamental difference between what FDR did, because we were in a deep depression. We had incredibly high unemployment. All right. That's not the situation today. We're not in a depression. We have more job openings now than we've ever had in the history of the country. We have a hard time getting people to go to work, in part because of COVID, in part because of government programs. But and so we're in a very different situation. And the other thing is the big program that FDR put in place, it's still in place, is Social Security, which, is going to run out of money by no later than 2034. We're going to have to cut benefits across the board 20 to 25% unless we reform it. And rather than trying to address that, they want to create new programs. Okay. The other thing is on Medicare. I just got my statement for how much my wife and I are going to have to pay for Medicare Part B and D next year. $15,000. $15,000 for what's supposed to be a subsidized social insurance program, right? And that doesn't count Part A, which you pay for through payroll taxes. But, look, the government's grown too big. It's promised too much. It needs to restructure.
I'll let the other panelists say so. Can I just respond just to something you said there, Dave? Look, if you have this cradle to grave stuff that FDR brought out, you're going to have to start having a lower life expectancy, because this just doesn't work. It runs out of money. But let me just say, the idea that FDR somehow saved the United States from this terrible depression by going on this spending spree and building infrastructure is complete bunker. Of course, it was great that they spent the money, especially at a time when there was a high unemployment rates, because it didn't cost the United States as much as it otherwise would. But let's just remember, the Great Depression was exacerbated. The Great Depression, instead of being a garden variety recession, the Great Recession became the Great Depression in the late 20s and early 30s because of the Fed. Not because of government, because of the Fed. And the Fed, if you go back and read the statements from the chairman of the Fed at the time, he didn't want to do anything because he needed to save the Fed's powers for a real emergency. That was what he said. I'm not going to do anything yet because the Fed only intervenes when there's a real emergency. And Ben Bernanke finally admitted that Milton Friedman was right about this. The Great Depression was the fault of the Fed. This was a failure of the Central Bank of the United States. And it was not government spending that bailed the United States out of this. That was not what happened. What happened was that the Fed finally, after years and years, started to release more money into the economy. That's what turned things around.
Well, two things. One, Smoot-Hawley didn't help, okay, which was protectionist, which was passed during that period of time. And secondly, the thing that helped the economy more than anything else, it's called World War II. And that's not the way they exactly want to stimulate the economy. I mean, the truth is, during the Great Depression, we never had public debt to GDP over 40%, 35 to 40%. The only time it ever exceeded 100 was due to World War II. Now we're about to
and it was paid down in the subsequent
and we're going up rather than down. Keep in mind, it was Eisenhower who post-World War II brought back fiscal responsibility, Truman a little bit, fiscal responsibility, invested in critical infrastructure and in human capital through the GI Bill. So through additional economic growth, which is the denominator, and restraint on fiscal policy, the numerator, we brought debt to GDP down to 30 to 35% by 1980. Didn't pay off a dime of debt. But we can't do that in the future because demographics are fundamentally different, because mandatory spending is out of control, and because now we're starting to feel the effects of inflation, and many of these programs are indexed to inflation.
People got burned though. World War II, you had the war bonds that people put their money into, right? And what did they end up with? They ended up with rampant inflation, and their bonds eroded in price, in nominal, in real value terms. You can't do that again because people don't trust the government anymore. I mean, this is just, it's not the right way to do things. Government spending, as the former Prime Minister of the UK said back in the 80s, you cannot spend your way out of recession. You cannot spend your way out of economic calamities. Kim?
Yes, I want to add something to what David said. Our medical system is a hot mess. Insurance created this hot mess, as well as I believe Obamacare, which didn't do anything to help us. And I'm a true example of the insurance companies not paying anything, even though you've paid in for years for it. So I just want to add that instead of putting all of this money into charging stations for automobiles, we should have been putting this money into a better medical care system, but also in insurance or no insurance. Get rid of insurance and just have money processed from our paychecks into a bucket of money that automatically pays doctors. Because they're not getting paid right now. I've got a $300,000 medical bill debt that the insurance companies keep denying since March when my husband died. And this is ridiculous. And this is why medical care keeps going up. And it's not fair on the people who worked all of their lives to have to pay into Medicare and Medicaid, Plan A's and Plan B's at more than $1,000 a month, which is what my husband was paying at the time. It's ridiculous. We shouldn't have to be paying that much. And they're not paying the doctors. I'm just saying they're not paying the doctors. So we need to reform that. Yes. Pass the ball to David.
Speaking about just one
Oh,
second. Speaking about medical systems, of course, we have different system in Canada. Unfortunately, last week I had to go through our system. I haven't been in a hospital even one day in my life, but last week, unfortunately, my wife fell and broke her hip. So she was operated, and she's in the hospital right now, and she will be transferred maybe tomorrow to a specialized rehabilitation facility which belongs to the same hospital. This hospital is $2 billion state-of-the-art facilities that I'm not sure if anything like that exists in the United States or even probably in the world. I don't want to sound like expert, but it's hard to imagine anything that could exceed what I've found as the equipment, the doctors, the personnel, the way it looks, like single rooms for each patient. It's just incredible, and we don't pay even a penny for that. It's all carried by provincial health system. We have Ontario Health Provincial Act, and the province is paying for all. Mind you, it cost budget of Ontario 1/3 of all expenses is for medical care. But I think it's worth it.
Well, Sasha, I hope your wife fully recovers quickly. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I hope so.
Look, you know, our healthcare system is a mess. There's no question about it. When I ended up doing the 10 million a minute tour in 2012 and exposed potential reforms to representative groups of voters, we got over 80% support for a dramatic reform of our healthcare system, which, among other things, would include guaranteed insurance for everybody for preventative, wellness, and catastrophic, because those are fundamental societal needs. And as you probably know, Kim, the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States is healthcare costs. That's the number one cause of bankruptcy. So it's our societal interest to have preventative wellness. It's individual needs to have protection against unexpected accident or illness that could have catastrophic consequences from a financial standpoint. It's the in-between stuff, you know, that needs to that either employers can handle, unions can handle, individuals can handle, or whatever else, which is where a lot of the cost is. We pay for activities rather than the outcomes. We talked about that before. We write a blank check for health care. We don't allow Medicare to negotiate for or Medicaid for prescription drug costs. There's a number of things that we need to do differently with regard to health care. And it is the biggest single challenge to our financial future. I mean,
yes, it is. I agree, David.
Can I just say about healthcare? I just want to say, obviously, you know, outside of COVID, I travel a lot, and I'm normally in 10 to 15 different countries a year. I am normally 9 to 10 months a year away from whatever is alleged to be my home. So I have expatriate health insurance, right? And at one time, I actually had my expatriate health insurance through a particular US company that also provides international coverage. And my policy went from about $6,500 a year to about 10 when I wanted cover for the United States. I have another policy which goes from 30 to 50,000, but that has evacuation cover and kidnapping cover and all sorts of different things on it. So ignoring that, the average amount that you would spend as an expatriate, not an American, but an expatriate from almost any other country on earth, is about $10,000 a year. If I was, in my 60s, it'd be about $12,000 to $13,000 a year, right? And you actually get graduated weights that are published when you first sign up for your policy. The idea that Americans are paying anywhere near that just for American coverage, when an expatriate has got under those insurance policies coverage in every country in the world, and if, for example, you want a knee replacement and you want to have your knee replacement in Germany, they will fly you to Germany. If you have, a broken arm or something and you want to see a specialist that's in the United States, they will fly you and pay, or they'll pay for your flight to the United States so you can actually get your care in the US if that's what you want. So the idea that Americans are paying roughly the same amount but are restricted just to the United States is a terrible reflection of what's happening in the United States. I agree that this issue should be solved, but it cannot be solved by just trying to increase taxes on the rich when you're not actually increasing taxes on the rich. You're just saying that. It's just politicians trying to do what sounds easy. Because it sounds easy. We'll make somebody else pay for it. That's always what sounds really easy. If you tell the rich the poor is going to pay for it or another country is going to pay for it, it's going to be paid by cigarette taxes, they're happy. You never want to tell the people who are going to get the benefit that they're the ones paying for it. The politicians are lying. They're dishonest. And I'll restrain.
Steve is a politician, so you got to be real careful.
I'm a public servant.
A public servant. There we go.
Steve,
Are you sure you're not?
Steve, watch out. Dave Walker's already agreed under duress that I'll be the Secretary of State under him when he becomes president.
There are three things. There are three things that you have to achieve sustainable success. Properly designed incentives that encourage people to do the right thing and discourage them from doing the wrong thing. Adequate transparency to provide reasonable assurance they will, in this case, cost and quality, among other things. And thirdly, appropriate accountability if they don't. Guess what? In the United States, in our healthcare system, in our K through 12 education system, and in our political system, we're 0 for 3. That's a strikeout. If you don't address those fundamental issues, you will not solve the problem. You can't just throw money at it. That will not solve the problem.
Right.
But I mean, I agree on theory that everything's correct. Actually, I fully agree on any point you made. Problem is that you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if we it's fine. Like like when the Greek philosopher was speaking about what's the nature, what the nature of humanity and on the human and so on. Speak about it, but as Steve said before, we have to put money on the ground. We have to put project on the ground. We have to do things. Otherwise, it's a fantastic discussion about theory, but your health system will be always worsening every day. Our debt in Italy will grow without any criteria every day, and we will have a long discussion. And this, I think, there's something. There's why we are the planet and the planet is dying while we are discussing. So we have the best solution ever. And then there's a way of saying in Italy, which is we will have the best cure for the patient, but the patient is dead.
Yeah.
I think I would translate that a little bit and say where we are in the States, rather than you have to start somewhere, I'd say you have to stop somewhere.
Okay.
We need to stop now. We need to stop growing government. We need to stop making more promises when we don't know how we're going to take care of the promises we've already made. You got to draw the line someplace. And one of the biggest jokes that we have is the debt ceiling limit. We're the only major industrialized country that has it. Now they're going to have a debate this week about whether or not to increase it, when the budgets they pass and the appropriations bills they pass guarantee that you're going to have to increase it. And so that's why we need to go to a Swiss debt break. We need to go to a debt to GDP approach, some type of approach that will bring back fiscal sanity and force a restructuring a lot of these programs we're talking about. I apologize, and I'll back up.
The US government, Dave, based on what you've said, sounds like one of my exes making promises that she can't keep. But let me just ask you, would you support a constitutional amendment requiring the government to have a set budgetary limit that says you can spend X percent of the GDP, or you can spend up to a certain amount, and that's it across all programs? So that instead of somebody being able to lobby government and saying, well, we want money for, these poor children, and if you don't give it, we're going to make sure that you're known for not supporting these poor children, the politician can turn around and say, well, in order to give it to them, I'd have to take money away from the blind people or these people, that people. Would you support some kind of limitation, constitutional amendment, so there is some sort of limitation on the expenditure of government?
The answer is yes. And in fact, tomorrow I'm flying to San Diego to address a number of state legislators from all over the country advocating for the need for a fiscal responsibility constitutional amendment. And we're talking about several options. One option is a debt to GDP approach. Another one is the Swiss debt break approach, which is really more a spending limit. So absolutely we need it. And I'm advocating for the states to exercise their rights under Article 5 of our Constitution to do it themselves if the Congress won't act, because Congress is out of touch and out of control. And this latest, quote unquote, human infrastructure bill is just another example of how out of touch and out of control it is.
Dave, while San Diego is a little bit more conservative than perhaps its northern districts, I wish you the very best of luck in California.
The legislators, these are state legislators from all over the country.
Right.
So yes, but there's something funny in the water in California.
They're not going to meet in Peoria, Shaquille.
There is something funny in the water in California. I know there is.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, it's been great to see David Walker. Wish everyone a belated happy Thanksgiving, and just such great insight. I mean, I just don't know what we can do I think I'll end with this before I leave. The other problem is the amount of money that's going in the political system. I mean, keep in mind that in the year 2000, less than $100 million was spent on federal elections. That number is $14 billion. I know that I'm being considered to run for the congressional district here to replace David Price. Probably not going to do it because I have to raise $1.5 million in the next 3 weeks.
I'll give it to you, Steve. Oh, that's right. I'm
going to take a pass.
Sorry.
And they're going to start.
He has arrived, Steve.
The point I'm trying to make is that it's just ridiculous the amount of money that you have to raise at the federal, at the state level. It's pay to play. Right. You're basically in the pockets of the special interests, whether it's the pharmaceutical company or the electric companies, utility companies. Nothing's getting done. And the only way we can solve these problems like David Walker's talking about is putting people in the government that aren't beholden to the special interests. Because it's never going to, how
so someone like Donald Trump, is that sort of the person you're describing?
I've got every day you open up your inbox, $5 more, $20 more, $30 more, pitch in here. What are they running for? Roy Cooper, he's after 2 years, he's not going to be governing anymore, but I'm still getting emails to give money.
Steve, the lead issue that we're going to talk about out in San Diego is a need for a fiscal responsibility amendment. The other two things that we're going to talk about is a campaign finance reform amendment and a term limit amendment.
Oh, there you go. Heck yeah.
Definitely need it.
That's the trifecta. That's the trifecta.
I'll turn myself out of office.
And that's something that's really important, Dave, with term limits, because politics was never supposed to be a career. But let me just ask you this. One of the concerns that was brought up when they talked about term limits before that I was aware of was that people go into politics when they're 30. They got 8 years of term limits and a couple of years fluffing around trying to get elected. So they have a 10-year career in politics. Then they go on to work for companies that are in industries that previously had lobbied them. How do you deal with that particular issue? Do you make sure that people have to be over 60, so hey, they're too old to go and have a career, or like what do you do to deal with that issue?
Well, first, the discussion is a 12-year term limit, okay, in a particular position. All right. So you could be in local office, you could be in state office, you could be in the House, you could be in the Senate, you could be president. So, but the idea is you couldn't spend more than 12 years in a particular position. Secondly, with regard to the issue that you're talking about, we need to toughen our ethics and conflict of interest rules, including the revolving door requirements. In other words, tougher cooling off periods. If you're going to be in public service, there's got to be a significant restriction and cooling off period so that you can't, immediately go out and be a beltway bandit.
What about private industry coming in? If I'm the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, can I leave Goldman Sachs and become the Treasury Secretary, as we know Henry Paulson did?
It's happened before, and it'll happen again. Okay,
yeah. Is that reasonable?
But then again, how long does the Treasury Secretary normally serve?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, have a great day, everybody. Have a great day.
Well, thanks, Steve. We're going to be ending our program here. I'd like to thank the Honorable David Walker.
Amazing.
If you want to run for president, our professional politician. Thank you, Roberto Sparano with Global Law in Italy. Sasha Starr from Canada. By the way, his wife was the 8-time Canadian women's chess champion.
And we're all hoping for a speedy recovery for
Mrs. Starr is very well known in the chess world, so hopefully she gets better. Dan Worthington, the former associate dean of the South Dakota Law School, and Kim Calhoun, the founder of IBM TV. We'll see you next week on Economics Monday Around the World. See you then.